Magandang umaga, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon, magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Ako nga pala si Michael Peña.
And ako nga pala si Brian Anthony Garcia. And welcome to the Battle of Clouds.
So for today, we'll be talking about IoT and Cloud with Ron Dagdag over here. So Ron, tell us something about yourself. What are you passionate about and what are you working on?
Hello, mga kaibigan. Ako pala si Ron Dagdag. I'm a lead software engineer here in Texas. I work for Spacee. I do a lot of their Internet of Things, a lot of their cloud and AI edge development. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm passionate about learning about artificial intelligence, augmented reality, especially augmented intelligence, where it's a convergence of augmented reality, machine learning, and Internet of Things.
Oh, nice. You know what? Whenever I hear of IoT and cloud, I always think about, they're part of this digital transformation trinity, diba? Cloud, AI, and IoT. So, I kind of am familiar with both cloud and AI, but IoT, can you give me more idea on what IoT is?
For me, IoT, Internet of Things, it's about two things, right? It's about remote monitoring and remote control. If you think about, at the end of the day, all these devices, dalawa lang yung gusto mong gawin. It's either you're trying to monitor that device. It could be, some patient monitoring or something that is installed in the building or something in the factory. You're trying to monitor what's happening in your factory in real time. And then, of course, remote control. Another way is, sending commands from, your phone and how from your phone to that device. Those are the two things that kind of, for me, the real definition of Internet of Things and how they interconnect with each other, right? So the way I see it is, you think about, you've heard about the term smart anything, right? You have smart factories, smart homes, smart devices, smart buildings, smart retail. You'll hear smart city, smart electric grid. How do they collaborate with each other? Smart supply chain, even smart farming. With all the speed, the sensors collaborating with each other, or and of course, with the sensors being as cheaper, right, and collecting as much data. You think about your phone, how much sensors it has in order to work together. Imagine if that one is, inside your home, right? Your whole home is being smart, or your whole factory being smart with all these different sensors. And then being able to connect and ingest that data and send that to the cloud to be analyzed and we've seen all the powers of the internet, right? How it changed our industry.
Yeah.
How we were able to collaborate, communicate with each other. And so what if that same communication between people also have that in the devices, right? So, think about connected car. What if one car can talk to another car and be able to, to know what's going on, like for traffic wise, and do improvements that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Actually, I guess on my end, just want to mention that, when the pandemic started and we began to look for stuff to do while stuck at home, I had a group of friends who decided to try out IoT. So specifically, we use Arduino. We've done the basics, Arduino plus breadboard plus LED lights. Then nakagawa kami ng Christmas lights. Then another one would be what else was it? We used voice sensors to turn the lights on and off. And we had fun, but these are obviously just play around. So, I was just wondering, how do you really implement this, or kind of like use this in a real world situation, or rather, um like, how do you connect it maybe into cloud, or how it will be relevant into cloud, this IoT thingy?
Yeah. So all these devices, you can create programs, smart lights at your home, or all these different Arduino or Raspberry Pi projects that you can connect data to, and build programs to it. But there's that, once you think about collecting that and scaling that up, that's a different problem, and that's when the cloud technology comes in, right? So think about, you made your Arduino program, you made a very good use case for it, but now if you have to sell that or you scale that to a whole factory or the whole market of devices, now you have to think about how do you manage those devices, how do you paano mo siya i-connect sa internet, i-disconnect, paano mo siya paano papadala yung data from that device to the cloud, or send commands from the cloud to the device securely, because these devices can get hacked. So you have to think about, if it's not, it's you have these devices, like inside the factory, they already have these connectivity, right? But that's just inside the factory. But if you're talking about sending data outside of that factory to the cloud or to somewhere else, now that requires more computing power to ingest all that data. And at the same time, it's that merging of informational technology and operational technology. Operational technology is, the ones that manages those devices, or in the factory or in the healthcare. There's that operational technology side of things, and then of course the informational technologies part of it is, talking about data ingestion and data transformation and all that.
All right. So on my end, Ron, I would like to ask, like, what are the good, examples or use cases of IoT in general, right? And it's there something like a quick kind of like overview. Na if I see this specific problem, I know IoT can help solve this problem in particular. What are those very very prevalent use cases na napapansin mo around the IoT space?
Well, the most common one that's very you know I've seen so far is, there's those smart home devices, right? You have your Ring doorbell that's connected to the internet. You have your Google Home and Amazon Alexa devices, right? Of course, it might have turned on all the Alexa devices that is listening to your podcast, because I just mentioned the keyword, right? And then you have all these.
I wish I had one.
And then you.
That's why I had to turn it sound a little bit lower.
Yeah, because it happens to me all the time, right? And then of course, you have your wearables also, that's connected to the internet. Yeah, the new new cars, right? The self-driving cars, that has connection also. And of course, not just that, the factories have becoming connected to the internet. You'll see that a lot of the smart retail. I'm on the retail space, so a lot of our devices that we manufacture is going to go through the retail stores. So those things, you'll see it more and more as as we go through the years.
Alright. Now, let's talk about cloud vendors, right? Azure, AWS, GCP, or any other cloud vendors in particular. Like for example, an enterprise company more than just yung nabanggit kanina about, poking around with Arduino and stuff. Um, in those different cloud vendors, what are your kind of like takeaways, like service offerings from these different cloud vendors, so that enterprise companies can get started to explore around it? Like for example, ano yung na-offer ni Azure, ni AWS, and ni GCP around this IoT cloud space?
Yes. So whenever we talk about IoT, you have to remember there's that area where the device itself, right? And then there's a gateway, which it could connect the devices. The devices are connected to the gateway, and the gateway is the one that talks to the cloud vendor, right? So think about you have your computer is connected to your router, and your router is connected to the internet, and that's how it communicates. But for these devices, like your smart home may need a gateway in order to talk to the cloud vendor. And then of course, you have the part of the data center or the cloud side where you have event streaming and device tracking, predicted maintenance, all that. So there's three things you have to remember whenever you start working with the cloud vendors, right? Now, one is devices. What are the things? Right? How do you connect those things to the cloud? So what are they offering? And then another one is insights. How is gonna analyze the data? When you have to do aggregation, how are you going to be able to do that? And then actions. How do you send alerts and notifications? So if you have to connect it to the phone to send alerts, or you create dashboards, then you have to consider those three things. So I think for the Azure side, which is I'm most familiar with, you have all the different products in terms of Azure IoT Edge. That's the one that talks about running the devices and managing the IoT Edge device, right? So most of the time, Edge devices, they may have maybe running Docker containers. How do you remotely deploy Docker containers to that Edge device? You might have to do that, or you might be something about not necessarily containers, container driven, but it could be code. How do you remotely upgrade that smartwatch? How do you remotely upgrade the firmware upgrades for that device? So you think about the TVs or refrigerators. How do you remote firmware update for that device? So those are the things you have to consider when you connect it to the cloud. And then of course, you have IoT Hub in Azure. That's the one that ingests the data from these devices that connects it to the cloud. And then you have Stream Analytics, Azure Stream Analytics. That's when as you receive the data, you have to decide, is this data is going to go hot path or cold path? Hot path meaning you're going to do processing and you're going to send alert. That means it's real-time alert. Cold path is storing it as storing the logs, or you're going to do batch processing later. So one of the things that you might want to look into when you're connecting to IoT devices to Azure is, how are you going to run? How do you connect it to the cloud? You typically use IoT Hub, and then how would you process them? Typically, you use Stream Analytics, or you would use Azure Functions, storage blob, those different things. So that's on the Azure IoT side. For AWS, each one of those, have kind of comparison between the two, between Azure and AWS. AWS, you have AWS IoT Core. So that's also for, how you would manage uh, devices from the cloud, or that's where you ingest that data. And of course the site, then there's the AWS SiteWise, and I believe that one is related to managing those devices also. And then of course IoT Greengrass and IoT Analytics. So there's a lot of different comparison in terms of what are the different what you call these different tools out there that you can use. But at the end of the day, yeah, the different services. But at the end of the day, you have to consider, okay, I have this IoT device. Is it gonna run? What operating system is gonna run, and then how am I gonna be able to send it through the cloud gateway, and then from the gateway to the the cloud vendor, and then from the vendor, then you do the data processing.
Actually, pardon me for asking this, but I know you made a lot of points there, and I would like to ask more about it. But there's this one thing that it's been really a buzzword, I would say, this IoT Edge. So can you talk more about IoT Edge? What is IoT Edge?
IoT Edge. I would say these devices. It's whenever you have devices, it's how edge means it's how close it is to the user, right? So cloud, you think about it. My analogy is like, for edge versus the cloud side, right? Is the cloud typically it's a rented computer. You rent it from a host but on the edge, it's something that is, closer to the user, meaning it could be the watch itself, or it could be the phone, it could be the switch, it could be something that's depending on how close it is to the user. So the processing can be happening there, or the data processing can be happening there. So if in terms of machine learning capabilities, right? So if you do people detection, or if you do some data processing, where do you process that data? Do you process it at the edge side, which is closer to the user, versus the cloud side, which is, you have to send that data from one router to the other up to reaches to, the cloud, and then gets processed on the other side. Does that make sense?
Am I right?
Yeah.
When I say this, that you store on an IoT edge enabled device, you store it locally on those devices versus on the cloud. Am I right about this? Or maybe I was just trying to explain it.
It's not necessarily storing, right? It's more of the data processing side. So if you think about it, like computer vision, if you have a computer vision task, right? If I have to send each image to the cloud, that would be too expensive, right? I'm doing people detection, or I'm doing some machine learning or computer vision task, and if I have to send each image to do that task and be processed to the cloud, that would be too expensive, because you're talking about number of frames. So if you're talking about these smart home devices, these smart voice, right? If you have to send the audio to the cloud every time, that would be too expensive.
Yeah.
But if you do your processing at the edge, it's cheaper, because you have an idle machine that can process it. And sometimes it doesn't have to be processed at the device itself, right? It could be the gateway, meaning it could be a device that it could be another computer or another network locally that you can send these this processing to. So if you think about, whenever you hear about 5G, what makes it really fast is not because that technology of sending data It's because it's at the end of the day, you're sending your data payload from local, from your devices to the nearest 5G network that can process it. It doesn't have to go all the way up to the cloud. Does that make sense? So it could
It
be,
does, yeah.
yeah, it could be your lamppost have a 5G tower in it, and your data processing can happen on the lamppost instead of sending it up to AWS or to Azure. But they have
Right.
connectivity. It's
Right.
how do you manage that?
Yeah, that's
And
right.
that's what
I,
opens up that capability.
yeah, I think I get it now. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, thank you for explaining. I actually was really um curious about IoT Edge. I've heard it a lot, edge computing, and it's really great to finally understand it with the help of your explanation, how you explained it. Anyway, Michael.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for that, Ron. And I agree. I myself worked with that. Edge live video analytics, and obviously you don't want to send that streaming video to the cloud 24/7. Right? That's just expensive network wise, and even
And
yeah,
and also privacy, right?
yeah.
So if you can process it locally, then it's more private than sending it up to the cloud, to the
Yep.
cloud
And
vendors.
yeah, and I think where cloud comes in particular with that use case, is the actual analytics, probably some form of logs or some form of data that is just relevant, that you store to a database onto the cloud, di ba? Na parang maybe you capture the detection and that's what you store in the cloud, but not the whole video.
Yeah. So in that case, that example right there, you filter all the irrelevant data and only the relevant information that is needed for your stream processing or for your data analytics gets sent up to the cloud.
Yep, exactly. Since you've already started the rabbit hole of privacy, all right. So probably last topic to discuss is what are some of the concerns doing IoT projects in general, right? That could be in a form of privacy. I don't know, like scaling, networking costs, or high hardware costs and that kind of stuff. Could you just elaborate around that topic?
Yeah. So we started about privacy. That's where it makes sense to have data processing at the edge versus sending to the cloud. Also, in terms of security, the more you can process it locally or closer to the user, the less data that you have to send back and forth, and also at the same time, the less issues in a way, in terms of privacy and security. But that comes in with complexity. You think about when you deploy a website, right, and you scale that website, maybe you're talking about hundreds of servers, 10 servers. It just depends on that machines, but now if we're talking about Internet of Things, or essentially not just the edge side, or even they call it the fog, IoT fog, which is in between the cloud and the edge. They call it fog. And if you're going to deploy at that side, now we're talking about thousands and millions of devices, right? 100,000 or even millions of devices. So that adds complexity. How do you keep up with all the connection, disconnection? Paano mo i-manage yon, and then paano mo siya i-update, paano mo siya, sometimes the internet connection is not reliable, paano yung failures, right? Paano yung alerts, paano mo siya malalaman, okay, itong servers na to, it's already outdated. How do you manage that remotely? Or in terms of hacking, because you don't, if you think about servers and IT, you pretty much have control over it because it's closer to where the developers. If you think about in terms of how you can manage it. If it's in the cloud, it might be more secure than edge devices, because edge devices, they can be stolen. Your cell phone can get stolen and get hacked, and how do you secure that? So there's more and more complexity towards working in Internet of Things. And of course, with all these different automation that's happening, right, with what the Internet of Things and how it can save time, how it can save cost. You think about the concept of implementing Internet of Things is, might be job opportunities in the future for other folks because of automation. If the more we introduce automation closer to the user, more AI related stuff closer to the user and how fast it can process that data. So that's one thing that we might have to consider also when you're implementing Internet of Things.
Right. I guess I just want to come back again on how you discussed cloud vendors thing earlier. Because I was kind of wondering, because since you mentioned different services coming from different cloud vendors, I was just wondering if ever I work on a project. Let's say I'm developing something, or I'm working on some agriculture technology IoT project. Do I have to kind of like use a set of services coming from a single cloud vendor, or can I do kind of like a mix and match from coming from different cloud vendors, different services from cloud vendors? Can I do that? Like, can I use Stream Analytics coming from Azure, then another service coming from AWS, and maybe coming from Google Cloud? Is it something that you would or you would not recommend?
I would not recommend, because in terms of the ingress and outgress, sometimes you're sending it to here, now you're just going to send it to another cloud vendor. How you would do your data processing, but you can certainly do it, but it adds complexity. But there's also open source alternatives. You don't really have to go through a cloud vendor, or you can have your cloud vendor. One good example is using Kubernetes, and you can have Kubernetes running in one of the cloud vendors, right? And then you have your cluster running in the cloud vendor, and then you can connect. And there's a way you can also have Kubernetes running on these edge gateways, or in the gateway devices, and then be able to do your processing there and connect them with each other and do other things, right? So in terms of data ingestion, you can also use Kafka to be able to, another open source alternative that you're not really tied into the cloud, but you can use like in Azure, there's Azure Kubernetes service, right? The AKS. You can implement it that way. So in that way, you can be cloud agnostic. It doesn't have to, you're not tied into one vendor. And then you can move from one vendor to the other without using all their services. And
Right.
that's one way that you can implement.
Yeah. And I think I would say, well, from my experience from using Azure services, when I try to, how do I say this, integrate them with each other, usually Azure makes it easier for you to integrate them. It's naturally easier. I would really also recommend using services coming from a single cloud vendor when dealing with these things.
Yeah, I agree with you, because in terms of capabilities, well, depending on what you're trying to do, typically the AWS, the Azure side, they have the one-to-one mapping already. Because so if you'll see the familiarity between both of them. GCP also had that mapping between, uh, you know, from one service to the other. Some of them may not have that in terms of security or in terms of uh, software as a service. One of the advantage of, because I've been using Azure more lately, is they have this software as a service solution that kind of simplifies a lot of the IoT, which is, they call it Azure IoT Central, and that's the easiest way that you can get into IoT. As far as, if you don't want to worry about all the different services connecting it with each other, and you just want the software as a service solution, you can start with IoT Central, and they already have a lot of the dashboards, a lot of the managing, connecting, and all that. It makes it really easier. The other cloud vendors, you have to connect each one of their services together in order to provide a solution.
All right. Yeah, I agree, right? And I think that's where the direction really is, not just for IoT, but I think technology in general, right? It gets more subsidized, more managed service comes in, and we're talking about, AI, blockchain, and all those different buzzwords. They get more and more abstracted, di ba? Parang, yeah, it's more around, do you want a more abstracted service or do you want to do the
Yeah.
heavy lifting of setting it up? So, ayun. So, Ron, thanks very much. Wrap up na tayo, no? So parang, actually, sobrang ganda nitong episode na to. Ang dami ko natutunan. Thank you very much talaga, Ron. Siguro key takeaway ko lang for this one is, one, the IoT is really, it's more around the business use case again, less about the technology behind it. But, in terms of technology, it's just a matter of how do you, yung 3 points mo kanina, no, Ron, like the hardware devices, the data analytics side of things, and yung gateway. So yeah, it paints a better picture of how this thing comes together. Because at the end of the day, right, no one's stopping you na mag-set up lang ng puro mga devices or mga servers that just talks to each other, right, without those abstraction. Yeah, so that's my key takeaway. How about you, Brian?
Well, I guess from my end, IoT, it makes things easier for us, and I feel like it's in every industry, I'd say, oil, gas, retail, agricultural, technology, and with the help of IoT, it makes these kind of like it makes it kind of like easier for us to increase the efficiency, to reduce the cost, and all of these things. And I feel like with the help of our cloud vendors services, it makes it easier for us to even integrate all of the things within IoT. So it's really a great thing that IoT and cloud is now really a normal thing for us, and it makes things easier to implement. Again, digital transformation has been reshaping how we live, how we work, how we play, all these things. And I really feel like it's a good thing that we have this already, cloud IoT or cloud plus IoT.
Yeah, and
Alright.
I see a lot of trend that's coming towards all these Internet of Things, the convergence between the augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and Internet of Things. It's gonna happen more and more.
Mm-mm. Yeah, all right. So, thanks very much, Ron and Brian. So, Ron, how can they reach out to you and, socials, contacts, sa mga listeners natin?
The best way to contact me is through LinkedIn or through Twitter. My Twitter is at Ron Dagdag. My email is ron@dagdag.net. So feel free to ask me any questions. If you have any, just say hi.
That's. I think I would definitely ask you something about IoT very soon.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, future episodes, right? Let's talk more about specific services. Let's talk about specific use cases, di ba? So, yeah, this is just an intro. Many more to come.
All right. I think that's it. Again,
All right.
thank you so much, Ron, for joining us. This has been really a great opportunity for us to learn and for our listeners as well. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.